Hi, Doctor. Hi, Vineet.
Hi, Richa. I'm so sorry. Actually, I had some technical problems, so I couldn't join early. My computer started restarting perfectly on the same time. So
It happens
yeah,
No
with all of us.
yeah,
I've struggled in some of the meetings earlier today, but those were all on MS Teams. So thankfully, this is not on MS Teams. It worked well straight away.
yeah. So we have an audience actually joining from LinkedIn. So we've integrated to LinkedIn. So we will be live on LinkedIn also. We have few joining in here, and few will be the people who are joining from the LinkedIn. They won't be able to have a chance to ask the question directly, but they can put it in the chat. So I will in a 3-4 minutes. I will kind of make it live in a LinkedIn, and it'll stream directly on our LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
How many people are we expecting, Dr. Vineet?
We are expecting since we are now making a LinkedIn live, we have 2000 plus, so at least the 50 we're expecting from a LinkedIn live itself, 50 to 60. Yeah.
And then we'll be stopping at 50 minutes, right, for checking the questions from the audience. Okay.
Dr. Chirag, I will be doing that from the back end. So the audience questions, I'll be having a parallel look at the LinkedIn also.
Okay.
I'll
And
be
then
doing-
you will and then you'll put it up on the chat
yes,
here for us.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
I've just shared my final presentation with all of us in case of any technical glitch, if it happens.
Great. We have 6 minutes to go.
So by 4:30, I have to finish the presentation,
Is it
right?
4:30 or 4:20?
4:20. Yeah.
4:20.
So 15
Okay.
minutes. Yeah. 15 minutes if we can finish it. Max is 18 minutes. So
Okay.
that so we'll have a good discussion on the panel discussion. Yeah.
Sure. Although I've rehearsed, but I'll still keep a check of time.
Yeah. Uh,
And maybe
Richa, it seems like your connection is unstable. Can you please double
Is it
check?
mine?
Yes. We can see the strength
Okay.
here. It's appearing a little poor. I see Dr. Chirag's is fine. Dr. Ramesh is also fine. But your stream is poor, so it might hamper our link, our streaming to our LinkedIn. So just
Okay,
you
just
can
give me 1 minute. I'll
yeah,
change the location then. Just give me 1 minute.
yeah.
Okay.
And Dr. Ramesh, for our joint questions, you'll go first to answer and then I will add on after that.
Yeah, I think we can go either way. Vineet, what my suggestion is, you can go either way, depending on the 2 or 3 questions. Once or twice I can go first, and once or twice Chirag can go first.
Okay. So I think I've already mentioned whom I'm going to ask the particular question.
Yes,
So that will be the primary panelist that where I will be asking that, and then probably others can chip in and add to the response. So
Yes.
so that yeah, so we can do that way. Yeah.
Right.
And maybe Dr. Vinit, for my introduction, just keep it simple. My current role and the past president of ISCR, so no need to.
Yeah,
elaborate.
we are not going too much, yes, because I think it's a lengthy introduction for everybody. So
Yeah.
so we are making it short and sweet.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It should be better now, Dr. Vinit, if you can
Yes.
check.
Yes.
Great. It's just the switching rooms between ground floor and first floor. That's okay.
Three minutes to go.
As everyone was saying, you can keep the intro very small, Dr. Vinit, just 2 lines. That's it.
Absolutely. One minute. So we'll begin now. Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's a warm virtual welcome to this exciting webinar that we have today with experts joining us today. Myself, Dr. Vineet, I'm from the Medical Affairs Society, part of Executive Committee. If you're somebody aspiring medical affairs profession or medical affairs profession already, we definitely wanted us to join with us by signing up www.medicalaffairsociety.org. Medical Affairs Society is a non-profit organization dedicatedly created for the advancing the medical affairs profession in India. So today we have a very excellent webinar lined up on very important topic, which is gaining a lot of interest among the medical affairs professions, which is integrated evidence generation. We all know that medical affairs historically was considered as a support function, and today it was evolved as a strategic partner in the pharmaceutical industry. Right now, the evidence, the need for evidence from the payers, the need for evidence from the physician side, need for the evidence from the patients, and the regulatory is increasing. And it is important that we leverage the newer strategies such as integrated evidence generation plan to able to serve the company objectives, to able to serve the patient need effectively, to able to ensure that our patient medications are used effectively in the real world. Joining me with us today, we have excellent panel lined up and the speakers. So let me start introducing them. We have first Dr. Chirag Trivedi. He's currently working as a Sanofi as a global head, clinical study unit, early operation strategy. He was previously a director of head of clinical study unit and Southeast Asia. He was ex-president of Indian Society of Clinical Research over the last 2 terms. He has a very good experience in the field of clinical research, clinical quality assurance, medical excellence, pharmacovigilance, and bioequivalence and bioavailability studies. It's a pleasure to have you, Dr. Chirag, with us today. The next panelist that we have is Dr. Ramesh. Dr. Ramesh is a Vice President of Medical Affairs Department, Clinical Research, Pharmacovigilance at Bharat Serum and Vaccine, Mumbai. He has an experience of overall 22 years in the industry, working for various companies, including Biocon, Dr. Reddy's, Novo Nordisk, AstraZeneca. He has an experience in medical affairs, clinical research, drug development, clinical trials, compliance, and pharmacovigilance. He has led over 100 staff and supported a growth of more than 100 medical affairs professionals in his career. So it's an absolutely pleasure to have you, Dr. Ramesh, with us today. And the next panelist come speaker we have is Dr. Richa. She's a principal health economics outcome research, real world evidence. She has more than 15 years of experience in HEOR and also leading the scientific literature review team at IQVIA with over 100 plus people. She has held the position of ex-president at ISPA chapter, Mumbai chapter. She has also extensive experience in real world evidence and HEOR. She's been the recipient of CEO award for her leadership skills, and she's also recipient of Then and Now award under the Healthcare Business Domain Association Ambassador Program. So it's an absolutely pleasure to have you, Dr. Richa, with us. So without much ado, I would like to invite Dr. Richa to speak about the clarifying all of us what this IEP means. And then we will have a very interesting panel discussion, thought-provoking panel discussion with the panelists. Over to you, Dr. Richa.
Thanks, Dr. Vineet. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I would like to start by thanking Medical Affairs Society for organizing this webinar on such an interesting and upcoming topic. Thanks, Dr. Vineet, for having all of us. With this, I'll just share my screen. Vineet, can you please enable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Please let me know once you're able to see the presentation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. So since we have very stipulated time, I'll just start. So hi, everyone, again. So let's today study a bit about what is integrated evidence plan. In last 3 years, our lives have changed pretty much. Things that seemed impossible have been made possible by us adjusting toward a situation called COVID. Many things which we could see cannot be done remotely, now we are able to do so. And this also has led to evolution, a lot of studies and the processes. So, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. If we have to grow, if we have to accept the change, then we have to continuously show our agility and grow along with it. With this, we come to a new topic called as integrated evidence plan, which is fairly new to the industry, and how it is and it will be going to help us. First of all, a bit of overview. Many a times we think that integrated evidence plan, this is a heavy word, which means it can be restricted to a particular phase of drug development. No, it is not so. It starts right from the R&D phase and goes till the post-marketing surveillance phase, which means in the integrated evidence plan, we cover all the phases of the life cycle of the drug development. Let us see how. Now, what is IEP, Integrated Evidence Plan? It considers the evidence across the various functions, across the geography, across the life cycle, and across the study types to meet a particular objective that is required by the stakeholders, which means it is applicable across all the functions, not only med affairs, R&D, translational, RWE, HEOR. It can be located to a region, geography, or it can be global, across the life cycle of the drug, and it is applicable to all the study designs. Sounds exciting, right? Now, how do we generate the integrated evidence? So for this, we have to synthesize the evidence from the various studies. We have to collect the data from various sources across the time frame. And in my further slides, I will cover some of the data sources that are considered relevant. Generally, the period of creation and updating of the integrated evidence plan is about 12 to 24 months prior to the expected regulatory approval, which means we have to be very, very mindful what we are trying to do, what we are trying to achieve. It is not so like in between of the study, like I now have done one systematic review and suddenly I realize now I have to do integrated evidence generation. No, this requires budget, this requires time, this requires regulatory approval. So generally, the process time frame is about 12 to 24 months prior to the regulatory approval. This is really very, very important. Also, the integrated evidence plan or the integrated evidence generation, it needs to define a particular business and the research question that needs to be answered. Now, why do we need IEP? Can't we do only RCTs or RW or HEOR? Why do we have to spend so much of time, energy, and skill sets to do something called as IEP? When we take evidence from multiple sources or from single source, it is a possibility that we might miss certain evidence. So to identify those evidence gaps and to identify that unmet need and to cover the entire spectrum of the evidence, we need the IEP. To find the common modalities across the function, it might be a possibility two different functional areas might be working in silos to come to a particular outcome. To save that time, money, energy by a pharma company, we can use IEP. It is very much stakeholder and market dependent. It also provides more support for clinicians. How? In terms of more evidence. It helps us to see beyond RCTs. Since long, RCTs have been considered as the gold standard. They are irreplaceable. We cannot replace them. But of course, we can have other complementary data sources which can amalgamate with the RCTs to provide and generate more evidence. It helps in decision making for the payers. Very important thing, patient is the king nowadays, right? All patients ask a lot of questions, right? I remember when I was expecting, I had so many questions from my gynec. I used to ask her so many questions day in and day out. And it is common for all of us. Whenever we go to a doctor now, we ask, what does this medicine do? How will it impact us? Above all, we take help from Google as well. So nowadays, patients become a source where they ask question. So we have to have a complete evidence plan in place so that we can gain more confidence from the patients. Now, data sources and other study designs. Now, this slides depicts the data sources that go into IEP. Everything that you think of, clinical outcome assessment, HUR, RCTs, lab data, mortality data, claims data, variables. What do we mean by variables? Data from our smartwatches. Yes, that's correct. Also, do you think social media is also a source of data? Answer is yes. There are several patient groups on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. From that data, real-time data can be picked up. It's very important who are the stakeholders when we talk about the integrated evidence plan. First of all, patients, healthcare providers, key opinion leaders, research groups, regulatory authorities, payers. These are various stakeholders, and this slide shows what these stakeholders primarily need from the integrated evidence plan. Their needs can be different. A patient might need to be more knowledgeable about the drug or the device that the patient is using, how much dent it will cause on the pocket of the patient is more worried about that. Physicians and providers, they are more worried about the efficacy and safety because they have to prescribe that drug, right? They have to see everything like, will the patient be admitted to hospital, what will be the length of stay. Regulators, since they have to approve, so efficacy, safety, effectiveness, incremental cost effectiveness, cost benefit analysis, and everything, right? Similarly, payers and the HTA bodies, they are more or less concerned about the economic value, the incremental benefits that the particular modality will have in place. Government, what is the value it brings across the patient, and what is the impact it will have on the cost if the government has to reimburse the drug. So there are various stakeholders which are involved, and their needs also vary. So integrated evidence plan basically depends on the which market you are catering to, also what are your stakeholders in question. So this slide shows various functional teams involved. So it's not only med affairs, it's coming together of the whole spectra to perform this study. Sounds really exciting. Okay, quickly, I'll just take 1 minute here and say why not RCT and RWE alone. You know, RCT have been gold standard since always, but in a randomized controlled trial, what happens is it is conducted in a very controlled environment where everything right from the body temperature to patient diet to what is the compliance, adherence of the patient, everything is measured and monitored, right? So the challenge can be when the drug goes out in the real world, then the effectiveness and the safety might change. That's why only RCTs these days are not sufficient. RWE. Now the problem is, especially in Indian scenario, is how do you procure the data? Many times, especially in hospitals where there are no good record keeping, RWE studies become a challenge. So that is why we have integrated evidence plan in place, which can cover the entire spectra so that these data gaps can be identified. Okay, so a very quick info on this also. Do HUR studies also have data wastage? Yes, they have. I have recently submitted one abstract in ISPOR Europe, and where we found out how doing a systematic review also leads to data wastage and what impact it has on the cost. So we did one study where we saw, like, if we do a systematic review, does all the data go into a manuscript? Answer is no. There is so much of data that we collect and that is wasted. Okay, so no study in itself is sufficient, but if we try and build across various study designs, we might help saving the money as well as the time. Needs and step. How do we do integrated evidence plan? First, we see what are the evidence needs. Then we do the global data landscaping, which means we catalog the various data sources, and there are various websites available. Due to constraint of time, sorry, I won't be able to take it up. Then we conduct a targeted literature review, and then we do the evidence gap analysis. Fine. So there are 5 stages basically of IEP. First is where we have the process kickoff. It should align with the aim and ambition of the product, right? It should identify the study objective very clearly. Then we draft the plan. We take the advice from the experts. We define the hypothesis. Then we finalize the plan. When we finalize the plan, we take approvals from the regulators and HTA bodies, right? Because most of the evidence that we find will be submitted to those bodies. So a protocol approval is generally what is recommended. Then we address the evidence gap. We see from which source we take what kind of data, and if there are any data gaps, those are identified and taken care of. Also, suppose you do an RW study and an HUR study, right? If you get the same evidence, it will further help in validation of the study that you have done. Your evidence becomes much more robust. Then comes continuously updating the data. Okay, now the benefits and the challenges. So benefits of IEP, they are aligned with the stakeholder needs. See, now you're providing the stakeholders a holistic picture. Rather than giving them just one evidence or a second evidence, you give them a complete picture. So nowadays, consulting like us, we are moving towards something called as FSP, full service provider kind of engagement with the farmers. So here IEP can be beneficial. There can be reduction of redundancies. The data that is not required, we can remove that. Increase impact and efficiency. The data robustness can be identified. Cross-functional team alignment. This is great because we know in the same company, different departments. So there are certain silos which are created. So, and this will also give people an opportunity to move across teams if required. And the maximized impact of real world evidence can be seen with IEP. Challenges, functional silos. We have to overcome that. Geographical barriers, time zone differences. Okay, then the data is fragmented. As we were saying, for RWE only, the data is in pockets. The data is not very robust. Lack of skill sets. So the kind of skill sets that we need is basically data analysis, understanding of data, understanding of therapy, disease area. So we have to, I think, inculcate more and more trainings to have this skill set. Lack of experience, it's okay. Everything starts with a scratch. We will build it. Now, adaptation of IEP. It requires push from the leadership. Leadership is considered as the role model, where they help in creation of value story, where they help in reinforcing of the ideas, confidence and skill building. And one very, very important thing that I would like to tell everyone here is, and I've highlighted is, it will help in creation of more jobs. It will help a person grow. Maybe a person can move from one function to the other when the person can gain adequate skill set. So I can see this an upcoming field where more jobs will be created and will help in attracting, retaining, and training the talent. Of course, we all need to be agile and flexible when we have to adapt this approach. Case studies, a very, very generic one, mapping patient journeys. So with the IEP, you can map the entire patient journey. If you see, we start from diagnosis, we identify the treatment options, treatment access, how this delivered, and the long-term follow-up. So if you see, various types of study designs are used for mapping this kind of patient journey. It's an amalgamation of HUR, RWE, RCTs, retrospective, prospective, all types of study designs are needed. Okay, so some quickly 2 examples which are non-healthcare related. So there's one transportation company, I won't name it, right? So you know how on a rainy day you generally see there is an increase in fare, right? All of us must have observed it. No cabs available, and if they're available, there is increase in rate, in surge in demand. And so how this happens? So these transportation companies collect data from everywhere. Everywhere means everywhere. Drivers, vehicle, location, your GPS signal, and everywhere. And then accordingly, they decide the fares and demand and supply so that they can have more cabs on the road. Okay. Similarly, to study the weather patterns. So it is one of the study that I've taken. It's from IBM Deep Thunder, which was a research project by IBM. And it was done in Tokyo, and information was collected from all the walks of the society, weather forecasting, global warming, clouds, snow, wind, rain, everywhere, to predict the disasters and natural disasters. And surprisingly, what they also predicted was what is the probability of damaged power lines. I wish this kind of things also should be conducted in India, right? So this will help us in creating robustness of electricity everywhere. So, the IEP can not only used in healthcare, but in other parts of the life as well. Very quickly, Aabha ID. Have we heard about this? So it's Ayushman Bharat Health Account. It's a 14-digit number. Why we are studying this? It's a very good initiative by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. And it's a 14-digit unique number that will try to have all your health accounts in one place. Okay. This will help in robustness of the RW studies, especially so that all the data, all the patient data is under that 14-digit number. Okay, it is very, very convenient. It is very convenient to pay the medical bills, RuPay card by which you can pay it. Sometimes we don't have time to go with our parents due to our professional commitments, and we are worried how will they pay and everything. So I think this is very, very convenient. And also you get certain income tax exemptions as well. So I have created my Aabha ID, and it can be created by using either your Aadhaar card or a driving license. I have created it by using my Aadhaar card, and since we all have best of the photos on Aadhaar card, I also have mine. Okay, so go ahead. I would encourage everyone. I have also given the link. It just takes 1 minute, create it, right? It has great, great scope in the future. They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. So be the change maker, learn and grow. With this, I think I'm above time, and I end my presentation here. I'll just stop sharing the screen. I hope, Vineet, I was on time.
Yes, you are on time. Thank you so much, Richa, for the wonderful presentation on IEP. I think I'm sure audience now must have a clear understanding of what it really means, IEP. I especially love the example that you showed. I think it's made of all of us clear to understand why we are calling us IEP. Thank you so much for making us clear. Let's get into the discussion now. So now we will start the panel discussion. And in the meantime, I would encourage the audience, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat if you're joining from the Zoom, or you can also post in the comment if you're joining from LinkedIn. My first question is to Dr. Ramesh. So, Dr. Ramesh, what are the differentiation? How do you differentiate IEP from solely relying on the real world evidence generation? Is it kind of another RWE? And in your opinion, the extension to that question is why the integration of evidence generation is really crucial?
At the outset, before I answer that question and share some few thoughts, I want to thank the Medical Affairs Society, Dr. Bhavesh Kotak, the president, and also yourself, Vineet, for inviting me. And of course, both Dr. Chirag, whom I know well for many years, and Dr. Richa, happy to be connected with her over the last couple of weeks, and really happy to be part of this webinar. Coming to the question specifically, I think Dr. Richa already clarified some aspects as part of a presentation, specifically the distinction between real-world evidence and a randomized controlled trial. I think particularly that was clarified. What I'm going to do is expand a little bit more on that. So real-world evidence basically is generating data and evidence in a real-world setting, which is in many occasions not possible in a randomized clinical trial at early stage, or even a late-phase clinical trial, where the control setting means that patients with fairly stringent inclusion-exclusion criteria only are part of such clinical trials, whereas the real-world evidence much more closely reflects the clinical practice situation. and whether certain types of treatments, I'm not talking of individual drug, certain drug classes or treatments or cause and effect relationship, etc., can better come out through a real world evidence. Of course, real world evidence also means that data sets that come through maybe from a wider population, not restricted to institutions or hospitals or centers which participate in clinical trials, but also those who may not participate in such studies. However, the RWE by itself would clearly be insufficient from an integrated evidence point of view. And as Dr. Richa clearly mentioned, we do need to look at the different data sets, including the early development, the randomized clinical trials, but also other aspects that are looked at. Are there any even preclinical studies where they better reflect on models which are more closely mimicking the human setting? Certain other evidences which may come from published reviews, literature within the same category of medicines therapeutic class, for example. In case of randomized clinical trials, if there have been multiple of them in different geographies, are there any meta-analysis completed? And what are the evidence coming out of that? So I would say, it's much more than the real world evidence, the integrated evidence. What needs to be generated is far more than the RWE.
Thanks, Dr. Ramesh, for clarifying us. Now coming to Dr. Chirag, a question to you, Dr. Chirag: how can integrated evidence generation plans bridge the gap between the clinical trials and the real world medical practice? And what role does these plans play ensuring the effective translation of this trial results into practical patient care?
Thank you, Dr. Vineet. Again, at the outset, I want to thank the Medical Affairs Society of India, Dr. Bhavesh Kotak, the president, you, Dr. Vineet, the secretary, for having me here. And again, it's always a pleasure to be with this august panel here with Dr. Ramesh, known to me, and Richa as well. So thank you again. To your question, if you see, and Richa covered it beautifully and as an overview, see, let's look at it from what is it that we would want from different perspectives of different the stakeholders that we have from a molecule. Let's say regulators. What do the regulators want? What do the patients want? What would the clinicians want? What would the society at large would want? So in that case, if you see, regulators would be looking at having generation outside of our cities as well. And more we know there are examples that have been now used that the regulators are open to look at even RWE studies while they want to approve an indication of the drugs also. See, if you see a lot of companies now, what they are doing is they want to see how they can minimize the number of patients, which is, say, like if I'm drawing placebo data from some other trials, probably that helps me to reduce the samples. As it reduces the additional burden on the patients. It reduces the time by which the drug gets developed. So it's definitely a positive scenario here. So integrated evidence generation plans will help you to amalgamate these points, and the regulators are open for that. Now, let's say what the patients would want. Yes, the patient definitely want to know if the drug is safe and effective, but they also want to know how would they want to use them. What is it that they will be able to do it after they take the drug? Will they have a better quality of life or not? So how will that hamper, or how will that augment, or how will that better their life is what they want to know. And that's where to keep that patient perspective. And patient centricity has been the key focus for all of us since many years now. So obviously the integrated evidence generation plans helps us to maintain that patient centricity as well. The other aspect will be, let's look at the clinicians. See, for the practicing doctors, they will always want to see what newness this therapy brings in. What is it that, how can I use it for my patient? What is the right patient population that I should use this for? When do I use it? What is the right dose that I should use it in? What category of patient that I should be having? See, because he or she will have the choice of looking at so many therapies. Why does this therapy stand out for my patient population? Why should I be using this? Is what he or she would want to know. So from a clinician perspective also, the integrated evidence generation plays a very important role. And of course, Richa alluded to this Ayushman Bharat. Now in India, I mean, this is more so in the Western world, wherein the payer perspective also is taken into consideration. How would this medicine help? in terms of, because it's a cost burden, right? So how will it help reduce the burden on the patient or overall burden on the healthcare ecosystem? And how will it make it easy for the patients also is what you want to know. Even for us now, Ayushman Bharat, we do have certain limits up to which the patient will not pay anything. And in addition to Ayushman Bharat, there are these state-run schemes as well. Just like yesterday, if I remember, the state where I am currently in Maharashtra, they have said, okay, all patients will get an access. The benefits will be applicable to all the people across Maharashtra. So obviously, the payers would want to know what is it, the benefit analysis ratio that they would want to do to say this drug would bring in. So as you see, it will help the patient, the clinicians, the regulators, the payers, etc. And that's the importance of having an integrated evidence generation plan. So if you have your plans, if you have your data, which is per these plans, you can definitely convince these stakeholders. So this is what I would say.
Great. Wonderful, Dr. Chirag. I have a subsequent question to you, which is coming from audience, and I will also ask Dr. Ramesh to chip in here. How IEP can be implemented in developing a patient journey pathway? So, yeah.
That's a very interesting. We just spoke about patient centricity, right? I mean, what would the patients need? So if you see more and more, and companies are doing it very, very rapidly. So there are two things here. One is the patients have been started asking that nothing about us without us. So now the patients are saying that, okay, we need a seat on the table when you're designing your clinical trial protocol. We need to understand if this is going to make sense from us. How are your outcomes? How are you going to measure outcome? What does it matter to us? So that is something which is started, and every protocol, I mean, I think by and large, many companies have this now, that every clinical trial protocol that they would develop, they would have the patient voice on the table. There will be an input taken from the patient. So the company that I belong to, for sure, all our protocols, 100% of our protocols are patient informed. So it starts from there, right from your development. The second piece is going to be, we do have patient ad boards, like there are KOL advisory ad boards, we have patient ad boards as well. They give us inputs into the protocol, they give us inputs into the operationality of the trial and see if this X number of procedures are okay or not. Would they be okay to have biopsy 3 times over the next 2 years? Do you think they can come for an MRI every 3 months, etc., etc., etc.? Would they be okay to come to the brick and site model of brick and mortar model, that okay, do we want to go to the site or do you want to have a home visit? What are they comfortable? So all of those inputs are getting into when we make a clinical trial design, and these are the ways in which we enhance patient centricity. So the patient is having the center seat of all that we do, be it development of the protocol, be the operationalization aspects. And also, if you see, when we disseminate the results, there's something what we call as the lay summaries. The lay summaries are made available to the patients so that they understand what the results of the trial have been and what does it mean for them. So the patient, again, as I mentioned earlier, is an integral part of this entire journey here. Maybe if the other participants want to add here.
Yeah, I think so. Dr. Chirag has summarized this very nicely. The involvement of patients, it could be via patient stakeholders, patient groups, their representatives, and so on. And increasingly, while they were prominent in a few areas, Chirag, as you know, certain areas like oncology or certain hematological disorders, these are the typical ones we knew for many years now already. But now, as he rightly mentioned, various other patient groups, certainly difficult to treat rare diseases. The patient inputs are extremely important. But even in chronic conditions now, diabetes, earlier it was focused a lot more on type 1 diabetes, but now it's looking at across board. So the patient's feedback into both development and also in the later stage, and what should be done in the future, and all of this is becoming sort of center stage for drug development.
Interesting. Thanks, Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Chirag. My next question is again, both of you is to Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Chirag. So collaboration is a vital success for IEP. I think we have clearly understood from Dr. Richa presentation how all the teams has to come together, especially for successful implementation of IEP. So how can medical affairs professionals can lead in effective collaborations with a clinical study team, market access, marketing, regulatory compliance, and patient communication team to ensure the seamless integration and execution of this evidence generation plan?
Dr. Vineet, should we have Richa just say a few things and then we can?
Yeah.
So she covered this area well. So
yeah, of course.
Okay, so thanks, Dr. Ramesh. So I think collaboration plays a very, very important aspect, right, Dr. Vineet? So, I mean, it is amalgamation of various aspects and various functionalities coming together, which I see as an upcoming thing because it will create a lot of interaction between different groups, also will create a lot of job opportunities, which I receive a lot of requests. Youngsters are struggling. And very important aspect when we come to job aspect, I would discuss is many of the newcomers are scared that AI might eat up their job chances. Okay, which I would like to tell here, no, that is not the scenario, and it's a very, very interesting and upcoming thing. Let's see how it evolves. So I would request for Dr. Chirag and Dr. Ramesh to provide further inputs.
yeah, I think in terms of collaboration amongst the different stakeholders, and we've tried to sort of in both in the presentation and in our previous discussions, what is covered is various stakeholders, and some of the obvious ones for today's discussion deliberation include medical affairs, clinical research, regulatory, those who are involved in the early stage development in the R&D, the market access, those who are involved in the payers strategy, the regulatory and government affairs related strategy, and a few other stakeholders. But and of course, not to forget important stakeholders being patients and physicians and experts, key opinion leaders. So I think it's extremely important that the collaboration happens not only within an environment of a biopharmaceutical company, but also externally across the different stakeholders, because that will help getting a better data, better evidence, and ultimately making a difference for patients. Because the newer interventions, treatments, clearly are expected to be significantly better not just statistically significantly better, but they have to be really reflective of patients' needs. Reducing their burden, treatment burden, less serious or less. Less, what I would say, less affecting their day-to-day functioning in terms of any side effects, for example, and so on and so forth. So collaboration amongst all stakeholders is extremely important.
And also, if I may add here, see, if you see again, when you have different stakeholders on the table, you will get different perspectives and you'll be able to meet the needs of those. The regulatory may have a different need. The medical affairs has a different need. I mean, within your own company, there are various functions. So, and again, depending on the structure of your company, how you do it, but the integrated evidence generation plan could be led by medical affairs. And then you could have all of these people on the table here, see what they want. And so that's the strategy making of it. Once you have the strategy, then you go to the tactical part of it. It's okay, these are the ways in which we're going to be generating our evidences, and this is how we're going to be using it. So it's important that when you get these people on the table, you understand and so you don't miss out on anybody's expectation, and you'll be able to generate data. And that ultimately is going to help. Let's look at the end result. End result is the patient gets benefited the most, and that's the ultimate benefit.
Correct. Rightly said. Just to add, I think being from the medical affairs profession, I think we are known to drive that collaboration between the stakeholders from the last so many years. And I think it is going to be an integral part of our profession. So we are known for it. I think we can very well do it for IEPs also. So not a tough job for us. So next question that we have from audience, I can see Joydeep has already turned on his camera. So Joydeep, if you want to ask the question, perhaps you probably can ask the question to the panelist.
Yeah, so thank you, Vineet. And so I'm Dr. Joydeep Chanda, and I work in Xavier in the medical affairs team, medical and patient affairs team. So my question is that as I was listening about the HEOR and the real world evidence study, so how the public health can be developed or improved in our country like India. So how this HEOR and the real world evidence study will be beneficial to improve the public health overall for our country.
Who would like to take it up? Dr. Chirag, Dr. Ramesh, or yeah.
Because just because as you discussed as the patient centricity, but in India the awareness of the much more less, because when you were talking about any clinical trials or like that, so patients were not ready to take those things or decisions, or they are not able to understand the details or like that. So in that particular situation, how we develop the patient centricity in Indian context? That is my question.
So there are two questions. I mean, two parts of this question. One is about we developing the HEOR setting in India for the real world evidence setting in India, and second is developing patient centricity in India. So maybe I'll try to answer both. And of course, Dr. Ramesh, Richa, please feel free to chime in. For your first question, if you see, we have a lot of data, but we're not able to analyze the data. Let me put it that way. If you see here, our clinicians, our hospitals, they have tons of data. See, the patient population that we see probably is a humongous one, right? The individual hospitals, and I know of various hospitals, I'm sure Dr. Joydev, you are also working with many of such hospitals who have their own data. There is EHR. I mean, if you see, one of the classic examples is the National Cancer Grid. So there are so many centers in the National Cancer Grid, and the kind of data that they are churning out, that's from India, right? We do have pockets of excellence in our own country. There are intramural studies run by institutes on their own. They do have their own research, whether they want to do it for DNB research or their own PhD research, etc. They are doing it. The requirement is to have at a larger scale of what we are doing at an individual level. And that's why examples like National Cancer Grid. There are various, I mean, even in diabetes, Dr. Ramesh will say that ICMR in DIAB, they have done state-wise surveys as well in that. So there are examples there, but obviously we need to enhance the knowledge as well as the expertise in doing such kind of studies and utilizing the data generated of studies to the meaningful patient care. It could be patient care in terms of the outcome, in terms of the treatment guidelines, in terms of the safety data, in terms of the reimbursement, whatever it may be, but we need to use that. So that's the first answer, I mean, to your first part. The second part is patient centricity is the key here. And if you see, in a way, I would say COVID has in some way increased the awareness of clinical research. Before COVID, if I would tell to anybody, to even my near and dear one, I mean, this could be a bit funny here, but if I would, okay, you are in clinical research, that means, okay, guinea pig, and they would, take 2 steps back, okay, we'll see, okay, and then they immediately change the topic. And come COVID, every household was talking about clinical trials because they were all eagerly waiting for a vaccine or a medicine that will help them during COVID. So phase 2 clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials became almost a household name. The clinical trials got prime time news space. They got headlines onto the newspapers, which, and again, Dr. Ramesh and I, we know that we've been a part of Indian Society for Clinical Research. We've had many examples of the past wherein the media would not portray the appropriate aspects of clinical trials. But now come COVID, that has changed. We do hear clinical trials for the right reasons on the right space. So we need to capitalize upon this bandwagon. Now, will we have everybody participating in clinical trials? Probably not. Even world over, the statistics still show that globally as well, there are not many patients who want to participate in clinical trials. So this is a global problem, but slowly and steadily, we have to, and it's on us as healthcare professionals, as people in healthcare institutions, it's on us to make sure that how do we say clinical trials also is a healthcare option? How do we brand clinical trials? When I say brand, means it's in a non-promotional way. clinical trials today, if it is a dreaded word, how can we give the right perspective? Can we brand it well so that people understand? No, I need to do it. Yeah, okay, let me think. I mean, see, today, and many of us know, I mean, in fact, when I was the president of ISCR, we used to get emails from the relatives of some patients. Okay, my father, my uncle, my aunt, whatever, were suffering from this and this. Can you suggest a clinical trial that's going on? So it is there, but it's far and few. We need to increase that awareness now, and that is on all of us to play that role. Media is on the right side. Media is with us today, and media also can play a very positive role. In our clinical societies where we attend, can we talk about clinical research in the right way? Can the clinicians talk about clinical research in the right way? So there are a lot of things that we need to do in the ecosystem so that patient centricity, I mean, if we have more and more patients coming and talking about clinical research, we would have achieved our aim. And that's where we should work towards. Sorry, I give a long answer to your question, but maybe Ramesh or Richa, if you want to add.
Yeah, I think you covered various areas very well, Chirag. So I just wanted to say, just to add to what Dr. Jaydev just asked. Various organizations, medical societies, pharmaceutical companies, in collaboration with societies, are doing various things. I think a couple of examples that Dr. Chirag took were related to the oncology and, of course, the ICMR INDAB study, which is predominantly involving the leading centers, All India Institute and Dr. Mohans, and they have, over the last, I think now it's crossed 10 years, they've published a lot, and one can just type in ICMR INDAB study and you can get all the data information and some very, very important, insightful data coming through that. I want to give an example which is slightly different, which is an area of women's health, where this is a very old concept, in terms of administration of anti-D immunoglobulin to Rh negative women who deliver the blood group Rh positive fetus as such, and they need the anti-D administration within 72 hours of childbirth, or this thing as per the recommendations. And we've seen that this is still not occurring in many instances, in all instances, and wanted to gather some data evidence on this. Not any product specific. It could be an old anti-D which has been there for many decades, or a more recent recombinant one, and look at outcomes and what is being followed across in terms of clinical practice. And so we embarked on a real world evidence study which started around a year ago, and it's ongoing and expected to enroll several thousand women. I would say in this case it's not patients, women who, as part of childbirth and just normal physiology, and then look at outcomes related to this area. And this again in a collaboration with the Obs-Gynae Society of India. So again, what you can achieve in collaboration with societies, and a couple of them are leading, and there'll be some publications along the way. The study is already registered on CTRI. So just an example that in this area, to increase awareness, to increase knowledge, to increase involvement of women, and of course to increase involvement of the obstetricians and the concerned medical community, that's Obs and Gynae of society and obstetricians across India. I think that's just an example. So.
Dr. Jaydev, you used one word, public health, I noticed in one of the questions. So since I come from the other side of the table, I come from a consulting firm, right? So yes, we collaborate with various pharma companies, I would say, in India, globally, to conduct various surveys so that we can have the data, so that we can educate the patients more and help to provide clinicians with more data, whether it is incidence data, prevalence data, data related to certain population. So yes, in RW studies, public health studies also play a very important role. So I hope all of us were able to answer your query.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving next. Thanks, Jaydev, for asking the question. Next question to Dr. Richa. So looking ahead, what is the future trends and emerging technologies in integrated evidence generation? I know you spoke a lot about the newer types of evidence collection in terms of digital tools, but if you can just help us understand how the future look like in terms of IP, and also the plans to the medical affairs professionals should be aware of, and how can they stay updated on leveraging these advancements to drive these integrated evidence strategies very effectively going forward.
Thanks, Vineet, for the question. So the kind of skill that is utmost required in this kind of field is the learning agility. Okay, I'll talk about myself. I have done my master's in pharmacy in pharmacology. That was my first master's that I did, right? And suddenly a company comes interviewing about HEOR back in 2007, which is pretty long, right back. So none of us actually knew the full form of HEOR, right? What it does. And unfortunately, till today in India, we do not have any tailor-made courses apart from a few universities, like now Manipal University is offering a certain courses, right? But back in that time, none of us knew what that means. And the scenario is still similar. If you ask me, Richa, is there a university or a course where I can learn about IEP, or can I have a holistic knowledge about that? So we still have that gap. Okay, how I learned? Most of my training was on-job training. And in my career path, I educated myself, updated myself, right, with all the aspects that were needed to learn and grow. Okay, so I would say keep on learning. Especially data analytics is one of the skill that is a kind of a common modality across all the functions, because when you see the data, it should make certain sense to you. As Dr. Chirag rightly said, there is lot of data in our own country, which is scattered, which is fragmented. So we need somebody to bring this all together, to stitch the pieces together. How do we do it? So for that, we have to have knowledge of about the analytics tool. Another thing that we all should know is knowledge about disease areas, having scientific background. The rest of the skills we learn as we grow. Also, it depends how you take your career. Do you want to be in pure play BD, or you want to be a SME, that's subject matter expert? If you want to be in a BD role, business development role, you have to go all out and you have to sell the business, which means you have to have knowledge of everything. If you are an SME, maybe you can have your expertise built in one particular area, and then you can further gain your knowledge in that area. So I would say digital tools, technology, yes, these are a must, but an individual should have a learning agility and flexibility. When I hire people, I recruit my team members, their experience, they are freshers from college as well. I don't expect them to run a complete pharmacoeconomic model or systematic review for me, right? What I see is the basic knowledge, how much they are willing to learn, are they flexible, are they adaptable? So I think these are the key skills that take us all ahead in our careers. Tailor-made course is hard to find, to be very honest. I get so many questions. Richa, we are interested in HUR. Tell us one course that we do. Okay, so it's just learning along your career as you grow. So thank you.
Perfect answer. Dr. Ramesh and Chirag, if you would like to add anything here.
Ramesh, you want to go ahead?
No, I think Richa covered this very well, and nothing further for this point.
Yeah. To me, I think it's important for the medical affairs team also to be aware of what they can do. I mean, what they have been doing and what is required for them to be doing. So skills, infrastructure, all of this is going to be important for them to build it up and see the application part of it. I mean, the more and more they learn, the more and more they apply, the more they will be able to say, okay, this is what I can do more, this is how I can do this. And then there are the advancements of technology that will keep coming, the advancements of newer methodologies that will keep coming. So how would they, once they have that basic requisite knowledge, it'll be easier for them to build upon that foundation to see, okay, how can I absorb more technology or advancements or newer ways of which I can generate data, or data keeps getting generated, but newer ways in which I can utilize that data. So that's going to be the important stuff. I mean, just to add.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Chirag. I think just to add, one of the favorite topic for me personally is the transformation of medical affairs, how the transformation of medical affairs was back in 20 years and what is today and how it will be in the future. I think what really, I think, brought the transformation in the medical affairs is about the people agility to learn the new things, and what Dr. Richa has rightly pointed out. So agility to learn is something is a very key for the medical affairs profession to transform to meet the company objectives or the patient needs. So so rightly put. So thank you so much. I have one more question to to both Dr. Chirag and Dr. Ramesh, and also Dr. Richa, if you can add anything. This is something, again, because the reason I'm asking this question, we have also people coming from the field medical affairs background who have joined the call today. And so how do you think the field medical affairs teams play an important role in the implementation or execution of integrated evidence generation plan? And how can the field medical affairs profession can contribute to the success of IEP strategies?
Yeah. If I can go first on this, and I'll start with the brief story. I'll keep it keep it brief. Back in 2004, we didn't have a job description of a medical MSL or a regional medical advisor, or that's the title we came up with in AstraZeneca, regional medical advisor. And we developed the draft and version 1 of a job description in 2004. And I was one of the 2 contributors towards that. I was also a contributor in hiring the people, and led the induction program for the first set, a week-long induction program, what they should do, etc. Taking their feedback as well. And I think 3 out of the 4 people across 4 zones were all freshers then. Of course, and this is also a time when we just about had the the simple mobile phones. I'm not getting the right word, but basically you could only make a phone call and a text message. That's also, I'm talking of that era where we just started out, and it was all in person. The regional medical roles was all in person with the doctors, getting the feedback, giving it back to the office-based medical affairs, and then implementing the strategy further over what's coming through. In terms of evidence generation and the integrated evidence plan, I think the medical affairs field-based have an important role to play. And we already discussed a couple of examples of large-scale real-world evidence studies, as well as a lot of the other data generated. So physicians, key opinion leaders, and often you get as close as possible the feedback from patients. Even if the field medical affairs don't meet patients directly, they are pretty close, meaning the feedback they get from the doctors, they can always, via the discussions, it's also a feedback from patients through to the key opinion leaders or doctors and through to the field medical affairs. So I think those insights that they obtain from doctors and what patients have been experiencing on medicines, on interventions, new ones, old ones, new versus old, and so on, it's an extremely important area. And also in terms of playing an important role in input into design for planning and conduct of the next set of real-world evidence studies, non-interventional studies. I think they have an extremely important role. So and we already see their involvement in these areas. So it shouldn't be just to for example, for new product launches or training of field commercial personnel, but it should also be in these areas which gathers insights, evidence, and ultimately makes a difference for patients.
To add to Ramesh, to me, the field medical is real world evidence. They are there in the real world of what's happening there. So they will be able to give us real world insights, and they are the ones who really feed into what would the physicians or the doctors want, what works well, what is the patient, so that because when they are in the chamber there with the doctors discussing there, they exactly know, how the doctor is treating the patients and what is the feedback that they get from the patient. So they really get into the strategy part of it to give inputs, which is what is going to matter to the doctor and the patient, number one. Number two, and if I may wear my clinical operational hat, they can also give who are the potential investigators or the hospitals that could be helpful in generating your evidence. So that also is because they know who has the research bent of mind, who has a good data collection center, who has the wherewithal to run such kind of a program also, etc. So they will be able to help us there as well. That's what I wanted to add to what Dr. Ramesh mentioned.
Yeah, and other thing that what we see, Chirag, this is across not just India but also internationally, and we know many universities, public universities, and even other universities in the US, for example. The commercial personnel, the sales personnel are not able to meet or call on physicians. That the time available for commercial personnel, for physician, for sales representative to meet doctors is really gone down significantly. So whereas the medical persons through workshops, through educational programs, through other society, medical society conferences, other one-to-one meetings, etc., play an even crucial role in getting these insights, etc. And we see the obviously the gaps. That's why in the commercial has increased a lot more. Now, earlier they themselves could get good insights because of the good quality time they would get from physicians, from stakeholders, but which is gone down so drastically now. So on this side as well, the medical affairs, the field-based play an extremely important role.
Absolutely. I mean, they help in real scientific engagement at the field level. So that's
Right.
really an important role.
Correct.
Great, wonderful. I have one last question. We are almost on the time. And this last question to Dr. Richa, very short and sweet answer, please. Do you feel a Master of Public Health course will be helpful in HE or RWE career path?
Yes,
Something
I
from the
have
career perspective.
I have public health professionals in my team.
Okay, so
So
answer
I
is
have
yes.
okay. So I have public health professionals. I have masters in pharmacy. I have PhDs. I have MBBS. I have BDS. And for pharmacoeconomic model, because it's a different skill set. It requires VBA coding. So I have engineers. Plus, I just have them scientifically. I mean, the person who has been trained on scientific background with them, because if you ask them to make a pathway for liver cirrhosis, they might not be, but they might be able to build a cost effectiveness model for you. Okay, so these are the kind of skill sets that I hire, and I have public health professionals in my team.
Okay, great. Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. With this, we come to the end. Thank you so much, Dr. Chirag, Dr. Ramesh, and Dr. Richa for the wonderful discussion. I think just I felt the time just flied. I think such an enriching discussion that we all have. Thank you so much for your kind acceptation and being part of this webinar and sharing your thoughts on a very, very important topic. So overall, I think integrated evidence generation plan is a crucial for a medical affairs going forward. As we talk about the transformation in the medical affairs, the transformation begins with the new strategies like integrated evidence generation plan, where integration matters, collaboration matters, and also the planning, the capabilities, and everything matters to execute this IEP successfully at an organization level. And more importantly, the leadership also plays a very, very important role for the successful execution of IEP, as alluded by Dr. Richa. Thank you so much for participants who have joined us with us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please stay tuned for Medical Affairs Society for all the related updates around medical affairs. I wish you everybody a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank
Signing
you.
off. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.